starting our session tonight. We were just trying to link ourselves up so that you can see us live for this discussion. Sorry about the delays. Is everything okay? Is everybody online? We're starting now. Okay. Akosia and Ashiagbo on the line, and you can send your questions. If you have a look on the link on your right hand, you can see a chat screen there. Any questions that you have, you can type it into the chat screen, and then we can see it so that I can ask her the questions that you intend to. You can't send a question or you can't speak onto the live show because it allows us to speak in between the two of us, and the session can go on time. So welcome all of you. And welcome, Ms. Ashiagbo. Hello.
Hi.
Right, brilliant. So we've got a few questions here, which I'm going to call out. It's questions from the panel, from members on the panel. As you all know, tonight's show, we're talking about the mindset change in Africa. So the first question is, in your opinion, Ms. Ashiagbo.
Okay, so before we get into questions, I think I want to just set a quick scene with regards to the topic that we are discussing today.
Yes.
Is that okay?
That's okay.
Okay. So because we use the word mindset and we may not have a common understanding of what we mean when we're talking about mindset. So I think it's important that we all sort of start from a common ground of what we're talking about. Okay. Mindset is a belief system. So it's based typically on our values, religious values, cultural values, etc. And this drives how we think, it drives our attitudes, and it drives our behaviors. And we don't hold a single mindset. I mean, that's sometimes the fallacy that is presented out there. We hold a mindset, a belief system that governs different aspects of our lives. So, but there's, however, normally a dominant mindset that actually permeates all the other aspects of our lives as well. Our belief systems, I believe, have been molded over the centuries by the West. So our perceptions have been shaped through the stories they've told us, the images we've been presented with, and this has been a concerted strategic thing. It's been done deliberately. It's not been by accident. I mean, right from the outset, when we were kids, when we were going to school, the books that we were reading were Janet and John books, Enid Blyton, etc. All these were painting pictures of a world out there that seemingly appeared superior to our immediate environment. Yes, we can travel the world through books, but I would suggest that we also need to use that system for children and for us to appreciate our immediate world. So that's an example, really, of how our mindset has been shaped. As I mentioned earlier, mindset is shaped through a number of things: religion, education, culture, etc. But one of the key things is culture, which is a mechanism through which we sort of express our beliefs. So traditional practices, the imagery we have, the symbols we use, all these reinforce our beliefs and our mindset. And whilst we may have tribal differences, there's a common underlying belief system that we hold within Ghana. And obviously, like across Africa, so you would see a certain theme. So to set the scene, I'm saying to shift national culture, we need to shift the common limiting beliefs. It's not every belief that we hold that is invalid, but the ones that are limiting us are the ones that we need to address. So mindset is a belief system that drives how we think, how we act, how we behave. Okay, so now, having set that scene, I'll be quite happy to take your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for expressing this belief system in more details for our understanding. Yes, you're very right about that. When we were all when we were growing up, what we believed in and what we were taught at school. So a lot of the lessons that we held in terms of history, in terms of biology, even maths, science, everything was using the education system predominantly in the West. So that's how we all grew up. And that's what we believed in, and we still do believe in that up until now. Hence our thought system and our beliefs have brought all these changes in our thought, in our minds, and the methodology in which we use in analyzing things in our lives. So the first question, in your opinion, how can Ghana bring about mindset change in a non-partisan way?
Okay, mindset by its nature is really a non-partisan issue. It is the exploitation of the mindset that is done in a partisan way. So the different parties or different governments will make promises focusing on delivering quick wins that appeal to the short-termist mindset of the voting population. That's a mechanism of exploiting that limiting belief. So bringing about mindset change really will have to be a collaborative exercise. It will have to be a collaborative exercise between the public, the private sectors, and the people in general. I mean, the government may need to take a leading role in initiating a process of actually auditing and evaluating our national mindset, and then defining, okay, which beliefs do we actually want to change and which beliefs do we want to maintain. That probably is potentially the government's role. But this process must engage the people through the traditional routes, our chiefs, sub-chiefs, etc., through the private sector, particularly the media, and also change agencies, consultancies that are actually used to implementing change management. And key change agents, the parents, the teachers, the pastors, essentially people in positions that have the opportunity to influence people's mindset. So, for example, our formal educational syllabus and style of teaching will have to be changed. It needs to build in the type of mindset that we define at a national level is what we want to promote or what we want to deliver. That could be driven by government. The media's role, and the media's role is very key, is to actually replace the stories and images and of white superiority we have been fed over the years with our own positive images, the potential of our continent, etc. They're doing some of it, but it's sporadic. We do it every now and again. There's a story there, there's a story here. Somebody has achieved something. We give them a bit of profile, and that's it. To do this and achieve any incremental value, to do this and achieve any shift, it has to be a conscious thing. So it really needs to be a planned thing. Media needs to actually have on their agenda item mindset change and really structure programs to actually meet that need. Our parents have to be equipped. They need to because they are raising their children at home. They need to be equipped with the right information, the right knowledge to empower. So if you have parents that are growing up feeling on a survival basis and are waking up and basically saying, well, we are taking along, this is how good it gets, etc. Those are the messages a child is getting all around them. And that's what they're thinking, okay, in this particular world in which I am, it's just a survival area. So I must either aspire to a world out there that is beyond these shores, or I must expect that this is going to be my lot. Those messages need to be changed. I mean, the pastors play a crucial role, but that's a whole other discussion. But we do see the evidence of pastors being able to misinform and misguide people to the extent that their behavior doesn't make sense to the ordinary. That is actually a programming of the mindset. What I'm saying is let's use that to good effect. So to answer the question, absolutely. It will have to be done in a non-partisan way. Mindset issue is not a partisan issue. It's a holistic, national, and indeed continental issue.
That's very true, because talking about the pastors especially, they are the ones that the pastors and teachers are the people that are more in touch with the local people in terms of everyday lives. They speak to them, they speak in their dialects or their languages, so they can understand them more. So they are the people that are directly in touch with the indigenous people in our countries. The media is also will be playing a key part in this as well, because they broadcast and it goes to everybody, live as well. Although as expensive as it may seem because of the charges, but if it's something that is that crucial, it's quite important that we get them all involved to be able to help in broadcasting and extending this belief out there for people to be aware of. So the second question is, as seasoned, corrupt-minded citizens, what are some of the government policies that can bring change?
Okay, I want to look at this question from the perspective of we need to understand the underlying reasons for corruption in the first place. Corruption is largely driven by our national mindset. It drives us to be very greedy, short-sighted, desire to get rich quick at the expense of others. All of these symptoms are a symptom of our slavery mindset. So in the long term, a strategic mindset change agenda, properly implemented, as we've described earlier, should assist in addressing that behavior. But in the short term, we need to review our administrative and governance structures and basically look for ways to make it difficult for corrupt officials to execute the agenda. So, for example, we could exploit things like peer mentoring. Starting with Parliament, we could exploit a shadow minister type model whereby the non-ruling party, they have the mandate to actually monitor and report on the work of those in a position of power, purely on a due diligence, because obviously if the boundaries of that monitoring is not properly carved out, they would use it as their propaganda opportunity. We're not talking about propaganda. We're talking about peer monitoring on the basis of due diligence to be able to say, yes, this project has been executed, or whatever process they went through was what they should have gone through. There's no evidence of corruption. That's a peer monitoring system. That could actually cascade through all ministries and quasi-governmental institutions as a starting point. Also, whistleblowing. It's a system that the West uses a lot. And we need to be able to exploit that. Now that we've actually created a special prosecutor's office, why ever not? Let's build on what Manasseh Azure actually started. But digitalization will also go a long way to assist because scrutiny and oversight. Because most things are at the moment happening in papers or outside of an electronic system. It's easy to obviously cover things up. But those sorts of tools, I mean, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is a starting point. So I guess the answer is we have two things to do. We need to address the mindset change. That's going to be a long-term process. But we also need to introduce robust administrative systems that make it difficult for people to actually be corrupt. So you address the change in the shift in the mindset, and you address the shift in the behavior. Because in the short term, you can't shift the mindset. It's a long-term process. So in the short term, you need to make it difficult. In the long term, you need to shift the mindset so that it doesn't even occur to people to be corrupt in the first place. Obviously, corruption is not eradicated completely. The West have corruption issues as well. What makes them thrive is scrutiny and oversight and prevent people from exploiting the system.
Oh, that's amazing. Very good points raised there as well. Yeah, it has to be stopped immediately or as soon as it's sensed in any avenue in terms of business avenues, normal everyday lives. And our judicial system has to also be strengthened and empowered to be able to deal with corrupt citizens and businesses as well. In terms of the police, what do you think? What should happen?
The police, there's a dual problem here. And I will always say that, and I'll benchmark it against what's happening in the West. Whilst you have corrupt police officials here, it's very difficult the bar for a police officer here to actually be corrupt is quite high. As in, they know they have a lot to lose, and therefore their corruption will be on a grand scale. What we have within our police force is that we are not necessarily rewarding the police force effectively. And therefore, the dominant mindset that says, well, the survival of the fittest, I need to look after number one, etc., then supersedes the national loyalty that a police force is supposed to have. That's number one. Number two, I don't believe that we have programmed the mindset of our police force adequately. If you go to the Marine Corps in the US, I mean, they live and die by their code of conduct. You can't, they literally recite it. They are robotic about it because periods and periods and periods of training. In fact, a significant aspect of the training is focused on programming them to believe in that code. We need to do the same. Our police force need to be programmed to believe what makes them a police force, to be able to live and die by the code that they sign up to. That's the long-term mindset aspect of it. In the short term, we need to really address their reward package and make it such that if I give a police officer 50 Ghana cedis, it doesn't become such a wonderful thing that he's able to compromise the very moral, the very legal fiber of our society for such a pittance. So those are the two things the two tensions we are facing. Changing of a code of conduct and addressing their reward package. It needs to happen. Otherwise, they are easily compromisable.
Oh, great. Another area that I think should be, or institution or body that I think might be affected is the judiciary. What do you think about that?
Similar scenario, except that with the judiciary, it's not, again, it's not the subscription. What we are actually experiencing is our national mindset being the lens through our national mindset, which is a slavery mindset, which is a survival of the fittest mindset, which is a get-rich-quick scheme mindset, being the lens through which these key professions, the people holding these key professions, are filtered. And therefore, they are quite happy to compromise what they are supposed to have signed up to. What we've done is introduce a legal system. We've introduced a police force. We've introduced the army. But we've not necessarily learned lessons from how the West have actually made these institutions effective. And I'm saying it's mindset change is really a brainwashing thing. You are brainwashing people with a positive thing. Because whether you like it or not, your brain you're being brainwashed all the time. The key thing is, what are we putting in the brainwashing mechanism? So simple. We need to address the legal system. Yes, the legal people have a code of conduct. But is there a passionate and dying belief in that code of conduct? I doubt it very much. And that is why we are happy to compromise that. So we need to address that again from the mindset perspective. We also need to address it through structures that make it difficult for the people to be corrupt. Some of the things I actually highlighted, whistleblowing in particular, will need to be robust in that framework. Peer monitoring, because not every single legal person is actually corrupt. So those sorts of structures will need to be explored and exploited within the legal, our legal system. But yes, it's a dual problem, and it's every institution you raise, that is two things. The mindset of the people is not tied to any robust code of conduct that they believe and subscribe to. And the mindset of people is dominated by our current limiting beliefs within our national mindset, and the structures and processes make it easy, or make it easier if we want to be comparative, for people to be corrupt within those institutions. So we need to do the two-pronged attack.
Yeah, that's very true. And also we have to compensate them for the hard work that they do, so that they're prideful enough not to be interrupted when they're doing their work. And that includes teachers. Again, it includes pastors, that they'll be able to extend that message out there to our people, so that they can gain the full value of as a citizen. Okay, the third question which we have is given that we face short-term volatile shocks from the nature of our economy in terms of export of cocoa, gold, and crude oil, and all our natural resources, can we have realistically have a long-term strategic change agenda?
Absolutely. The short answer to that is yes, we can, and yes, we have to. Every planning process, regardless of the time horizon over which you're planning, actually over which it spans, will involve making some forecasts, making some assumptions, and inherent in those assumptions, obviously, are some risks that the assumptions that you have made may prove invalid. Naturally, obviously, the longer the time horizon, the more likely that the forecast will deviate from reality. But what this question is raising is really one such potential risk. But when you set up a strategic agenda, one of the key things is that it has to be underpinned by a robust risk issue dependency identification and management portfolio. So we need to identify what risks, what are the things that are going to stop this agenda from actually being executed. One of the risks is this volatility. We need to be able to identify what issues, what are the current problems that will stop it, what external or internal dependencies do we have in order to be able to execute this? Because the dependencies, again, have risk. Why? Because if you're dependent on something and it doesn't happen, the risk is the risk of that dependency not materializing in the way in which you expected it to. So we need to do that. That's the whole essence, whatever time horizon. You do your risk identification, issues identification, dependencies identification. You put in place mitigation strategies that would help to manage these risks away. And if the risks become issues, again, we need to have strategies to either manage them. So our strategy will include things like, okay, if this risk of volatility is there, we need to do some scenario testing, for instance. If the price of cocoa falls by this amount, what is the implication for our revenue? What is that implication for the projects that are outlined in the strategic agenda in the short, in the medium, and in the long term? It's also important to highlight that a strategic agenda is not static, because so it can be revised with new information that invalidates the assumptions that were made at the outset. But this has to be done in a controlled way, because we can't just be reacting every time there's a slight change. Oh, we need to change the agenda. That's not the essence of it. The agenda is baseline, and any fundamental shift in assumptions that invalidate what the agenda stands for is what is actually then used to revise the agenda. So yes, my answer to that is we can plan over a long-term horizon. We just need to make sure we have a robust risk and issue management system.
Wonderful. Thanks for the answer. We need to girdle up and wake up and do so many things on our own. I think we've been spoon-fed for a while now, and through these discussions, it would help us, enlighten us, and also empower us to be able to go out and be who we really are. A lot of the time, we say that there's a lot of talk and getting nowhere. Yes, there's a lot of talk in these things that but the talk equips us to, and also enlightens us of what's going on, what's happening around us. And these discussions we regard very highly, because it's part of the mindset change that allows us and equips us with so much knowledge in all these different areas and aspects of our lives. It's regardless of who you are and which industry that you are an expert in. You can't be a collective expert in all the various industries. But as we're together, it allows us to know about what's happening in different areas in our lives. That's why we have and hold these discussions, and we hold them very highly. We do not expect an immediate answers from the questions that we ask. We do not expect immediate issues being resolved. But what it resolves, it resolves the questions that we've always had in mind, that we didn't know how to get through those questions. And also, once you get to know how to resolve these issues, it helps especially the business leaders, the entrepreneurs, and also it helps ministers, people who are in charge of the various areas, to make up the right decisions. That is why we have these discussions. So we also are very happy that you guys are able to get this information to equip you in your everyday lives. Now, the fourth question that we have to Ms. Akosia is, do Ghanaians need a mindset change, and why will they need a mindset change, and in what areas? This is a very general question, but it also equips us in all the various areas. That is why we're asking that.
Okay. To address that, yes, I mean, we do hold some limiting beliefs. So the answer to the question is yes, but I will expand a bit. I think it's important to highlight or at least describe at some level what the Ghanaian and indeed potentially the African mindset appears to be. And whilst, yes, this may come across as a generalization, yeah, there are pockets of people that don't hold that mindset, but that's because they've gone through the process of shifting their mindset. This is the dominant mindset that we are talking about. The dominant mindset is largely a slavery mindset. This mindset, which is, it confers a power basically on an external being. So the person, it's outside, every power is outside of myself. And that's the master. This is the master slave mentality. As opposed to me having the power within myself. And it's evidence in how some of the things that we do, how we actually behave. We think small and not big. Our entrepreneurs and business people, some may be thinking big. So please, all this is caveated. We will have individuals that have broken the mold. But I would say they've changed their minds and that's why they are able to. But in general, we are thinking small, not big. We're not thinking in terms of even an entire Ghanaian market, let alone a regional market, let alone a continental market, and then even globally. So we don't even explore things like business models such as franchises, branches, etc. And these are, I mean, I'm talking about people in the upper echelons of our community are still not thinking in those terms sometimes. We have a short-term, not a long-term horizon. So immediate gratification, which is why we're willing to take a small bribe at the expense of the long-term rewards, which is the reverse. When you go to the West, they are quite happy to pay into a system with the view that in 100 years' time, they would actually be reaping something and a bigger something as it is. We have this individualistic, not collaborative mindset. So in both business and personal relationships, there's an inherent mistrust. And this is, again, coming from both a mistrust and a competitive mindset that says that I'd rather do it all by myself because then I become superior, etc., etc. Again, slavery mindset appearing or translating itself into master slave. I become the dominant. I become the master. I'm trying to break out of that. That's how it actually manifests itself. We have an employee mindset, not an entrepreneurial. We're looking, most of our educational system grooms us and trains us to come out looking for a job. And there's evidence to support this, recent evidence to support this. The Immigration Service advertised for a role. They were looking to get 500 people, appoint 500 people. They had 84,000 plus applicants. The NEIP, National Entrepreneurial Innovation Program, I believe that's what it is. They advertised for people to submit business plans. They were looking to, again, support 500 business plans. They had 7,000 people apply. So if you look at the ratio, for every one person that is thinking entrepreneurially within this context, 12 are looking for a job. So, I mean, these are the limiting beliefs, the limiting elements of our mindset that definitely need to shift if we are to realize our country's potential.
Wonderful. We had one question from our viewers, which I'd like to ask you. It's from Frank Amankwa. And the question is, how can we change mindsets of the masses? What mechanisms exist that we can leverage effectively?
I think when we go through some of the questions that we are going through, there is a similar question raised that actually would answer that. But changing the mindset, I mean, I have what I call the HEAD principle, which is part of my Mindset Revolution program. And essentially, you set up a hypothesis. The hypothesis is we want to program people with an entrepreneurial mindset. What if that is the hypothesis? What is an entrepreneurial mindset? People that actually are able to go out there, see problems as opportunities and implement innovative solutions. And innovative not in the blue sky, wild thinking that sometimes we try to make them, but basically different ways of actually resolving problems. If that's our hypothesis, the E stands for providing the evidence. So the evidence, we need to give people the evidence that says that, yes, if you hold this mindset, this is what it translates into. And that comes through role models, mentors, etc. And then we need to actually give people the opportunity to act. So we give them, we set goals and targets, etc. That's action. We reinforce that. And then we actually then determine, evaluate what shift has happened. Now, in terms of structures, our educational system will need to employ this mechanism. Our radio stations, their messages need to employ this mechanism. We need to be programming people in imagery, in what they hear, in the things they do, the projects that we give them, in our government structures, so that the government, we can't say, oh, we want you to have an entrepreneurial mindset, but our structures and systems will actually nurture that. We need to make it palatable and attractive for me to leave university, graduate, and come out and think, I will set up my own business. Having programmed me through the educational system to see that there are so many opportunities out there, because every problem has in it an inherent an opportunity, then you need to provide me the structures that enable me to be able to exploit that opportunity. So there are a number of ways in which we need to, we will be able to do this. It's through our schools, through our churches, through our traditional leaders, etc., etc., etc. And that's what I would say on that subject for now. It needs to be reinforced and it needs to be holistic. But basically, all you're trying to do at a national level is to brainwash people with the right mindset. And to do that, we need to define what the mindset is we're looking for.
Wonderful. We've got another question from Mr. Eric Mensah that is there a correlation between mindsets and culture and religion? If there is, how do we coordinate so that if it doesn't look like we are learning in one direction, i.e. religion or culture, etc.?
Okay. I won't call, well, yeah, you can call it correlation, but what I want to actually clarify is your mindset is an umbrella. This is the mindset that you hold for different aspects of your life. That mindset or those mindsets are shaped by beliefs. Now, where do beliefs come from? We have cultural beliefs that will shape your mindset in certain respects. We have religious beliefs that will shape your mindset in certain respects. We have educational systems that actually also shape certain beliefs, and therefore that will shape your mindset. So if you're saying, is there correlation? Absolutely. And in terms of, but it's not a correlation as in positive or negative, etc. There is a relationship. Those elements influence your belief systems, which then determine your mindset or shape your mindset about different aspects of your life. So your mindset about marriage may be shaped through your either culture or through religion or a combination of the two. Your mindset about your career may be shaped through culture, religion, education, a combination of all three. So you're absolutely right. We can't address one without the other, because if there are limiting religious beliefs that are undermining what we are trying to shape as a national mindset, we need to be able to replace those limiting religious beliefs. And hence, I have said the pastors, the imams, etc., also have a key role to play in this process.
That's good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The mindset change is such that it involves a holistic way of thinking in terms of your religion, education, and of course, it also affects your way of perceiving things in those relationships. So yeah, thanks for explaining that. Now we go to our fifth question, which is, do the current mindsets or culture of Africans affect international trade and business growth?
Absolutely. As I previously said, that we have a small thinking mindset that narrows our entrepreneurial vision, and thereby, obviously, our business growth. I mean, we limit the scope of our potential businesses that we set up through this kind of thinking. We don't come up with innovative solutions. We are not thinking beyond the confines of our immediate locality. So our solutions are basically there to say, I need to solve this immediate problem within this local area, rather than a vision that says, actually, this could be a global or a continental solution that needs to go out there. So that definitely limits our business potential and our business growth. With regards to the international trade, I would say we actually negotiate from a position of weakness. So the West dictate the prices at which they buy our goods, and we think they're doing us a favor. When in truth, and this is a message that I think is out there and needs to be constantly reinforced, Africa is one of the primary continents that can close its borders and not merely survive. It would actually thrive. It can close its borders to the West and be self-sufficient and thrive. However, let me give you the evidence of why I say we're negotiating from a point of weakness. We take on free trade policies, which allow the West to be able to use our countries as dumping grounds for unwanted goods. On the grounds that we think that, we need to accept that, because if we don't accept that, the so-called aid they give us will actually disappear. And if we don't get that aid, we cannot survive or thrive. So yes, our current mindset, small thinking, slavery mindset, etc., is limiting the nature of the businesses we are developing out there, the entrepreneurial potential we are exploiting, and the way in which we are negotiating international trade. Definitely.
Oh, great. That's equally important on a wider aspect. I'm just wondering, because I see every country as a business. Without any income, you won't be able to survive.
Yep.
So, my little entrepreneurial mind says to me, we have an open market out there, and we need to take advantage of the markets.
Yep.
And it makes me think again extensively, not only into Africa, but the rest of the world. Not targeting any particular countries in terms of trade relationships, but targeting countries depending on what we have on offer and how we can negotiate to get the best deal out of. And my tentacles come up and in terms of where business is, try to trade with the potential business owners in that mind set. So yeah, it doesn't limit me to thinking that we can only trade within ourselves. But yes, I think China, India, and some of the Asian countries had the same issues as we currently having, or with the same issues as we've had for the last 60 years. And they've moved from the slave mind sets change due to changes that they decided to bring into place themselves, and took advantage, and are now developed and are moving on from the poverty state into more developed state. So I believe we should be able to do the same. In your opinion, would you say that we need to learn from such countries?
Absolutely. I always believe in don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But you also can't pick a solution and just implement it. We need to look at the lessons learned out there, the models that have been used successfully out there, the pros, the cons. We need to take those lessons, we need to tailor them, and then we need to come up with our own model that actually would work within our context. So absolutely. If somebody has gone ahead of you, why not actually take the advantage of leapfrogging and not actually lagging behind? So yes, is the short answer to that.
We have a quick question that I'll throw in. It will set us slightly back, but it makes a lot of sense. That's why I'm asking that particular question. And that question is from Mr. Robert Wood. And he's saying that how can we change the mindset by use of pastors if they themselves are entrenched in the partisan politics, not forgetting our traditional leaders as well?
Yep. This is raising the whole coach approach. We cannot change. He's absolutely right. We cannot change. We cannot go to pastors right now and say, oh, change the mindset of your congregation. We need to target the pastors. We need to target the traditional leaders. We need to target the people in positions of authority. This is why we need to even change the way we teach our teachers and how their teaching styles should be. So we need those mechanisms. That's why I actually packed the pastors, the imams, etc., because that's going to be the most difficult, but that's also going to probably give us the most traction. So we can't say that the task is too difficult, so we won't confront it. So the point he's raising is absolutely right. We need to change the mindset, because let's understand that pastors, imams, teachers, parents, they are not separate to the system within which we are growing. They are also operating on that same slavery mindset. What they are doing is exploiting. So they've positioned themselves as the masters, and the masses have positioned themselves as the slaves. And what we need to erase is that mindset. That mindset that says that my thriving, my doing well has to be at the expense of you, because we are individualistic, not collaborative. Because we think small. I need an immediate gratification. So I need to exploit it to get as much money out of you now that you have it, because who knows, tomorrow you won't have it. That's short term. That's survival of the fittest. So in short answer to that question, yes, it has to be a coach the coach approach, mentor the mentor approach. It has to come top down. The people that are in position to influence will need to be targeted. But we can't use them as the starting point, because that's the highest level of resistance. So we need the messages to start filtering down, not necessarily with their assistance. If you start empowering the people through channels such as radio, they will ask for something different. Once they ask for something different, your pastors, your imams, your teachers, etc., will also realize that they need to shift. So it's a two-pronged attack. Let's reach the masses, open the eyes of the masses. Because a pastor cannot exploit somebody unless they are vulnerable. Remove their vulnerability by reprogramming them, by giving them information. Once that is removed, they then demand for something different. Pastors will have to shift. Imams will have to shift. We then reinforce that through using them as the coaches. So it's a two-pronged attack. Absolutely. Brilliant question, actually.
It's a pretty big area to cover, really, because as you rightly mentioned, it's a top-down approach, really, that we need to take. Looking at the top-down approach is a lot of work that needs to go on, and thinking about how we are even going to approach it is just mind-boggling, because it's something that has been deeply entrenched in our lives so much that to pull that out and or reorganize and also implement these things is a bit like asking the Americans to give their guns up. So it's quite an in-depth thing.
It's a daunting task, but I need us to understand. I mean, we're not talking time horizons of, within 10 years, somebody's mindset. We're talking centuries here. You and I will not be alive to actually see some of the real radical step change in the thinking. But it's no use sitting here being frustrated and saying, oh, well, this is too deeply entrenched and therefore let's leave it as it is. The West is not changing. The recent issues, the whole furore about someone calling us S-holes. Yeah, all those things are images. Don't get me wrong. I won't say, okay, they are in those places and pockets, but there is stark poverty and S-holes in the West as well. All those statements are contrived to keep us down. And we continue to happily subscribe to that. We need to replace that. So yes, it's a daunting task. It's a long-term task. It's not something that you and I will be here to see ultimately, but at least there's a stepping stone. We can't just throw our arms in the air and basically say, oh, well, this is it. It's too difficult. The elephant is too big to eat, and therefore we are not going to attempt to eat it at all. We have to eat the elephant in bite-sized chunks.
Well, that brings us to our sixth question, which is really similar. And that is, what are some of the notable characteristics of Africans that affect their decision making?
Okay, this is back to the slavery mindset. And I think I've said some of the things already, but I'll just reinforce. Our decisions are based on short-term views, short-term gratification at the expense of long-term. We want to play catch-up with the West because the West are superior. Survival of the fittest. So we are selfish in our negotiations. We don't wish to collaborate with each other because I need to be dominant, you need to be the slave. We don't take bold steps because we see ourselves as small. Our success is defined by short-term material things. We don't think from a legacy perspective. These are some of the things that the ways in which we make decisions based on an underlying slavery mindset.
Okay. We've got one question from Mr. Peter Enti. It's also a very daunting question. Each one of these ones have been so far. It goes number 7. Can we realistically have a non-partisan plan? How do we put these supposed juxtaposed parties together? Their manifestos aren't that far apart, but the rhetoric, at least in public, seems to split us down the middle. Kenya was able to bring McKinsey to help them fashion a long-term plan. Do we think, or do you think we can do similar?
I like this question because actually inherent in that question is the fact that yes, it actually buttresses the whole fact that we need a non-partisan plan, because it states the fact that when you juxtapose the various manifestos, there's hardly any difference. What the difference is the propaganda and the noise. That is a deflection from really the real issue. Why is that the case? Because there are only so many different ways in which you can define the problems that we have in the country. And there are only so many different ways you can talk about the solutions we need to bring to those problems. The whole idea is we seem to have adopted this Western approach, okay, Western democracy. But the West is coming from a strong baseline. So they have their established structures, etc. So they can afford to have these bipartisan individual parties having their own manifestos because they are addressing nuances, they are addressing incremental changes, and therefore you can say this and you can say that. We have a low baseline, and therefore we need a holistic agenda that is going to address the issues that we have and position us strategically in the future. That needs to be holistic. That agenda needs to be set by the country. It needs to be developed for the people, by the people. It should be an agenda that actually addresses interdependencies across the various sectors and also addresses the synergies. So what's the point in setting up factories in every district if our transportation network is such that we can't transport the goods to the markets that we are aspiring to? If our agenda becomes so siloed that transportation is being looked at differently to the entrepreneurial business agenda, and that is also being looked differently to the energy agenda, that becomes a disaggregated agenda, which we are not in a position to entertain. That's one. Two, our agenda, we can't afford to have different governments coming in and basically saying, okay, this one started the road from the south, my voters are in the west, so I start the road from the west. And this is what we've been having. And essentially, it isn't working because nothing is ever complete. We never actually arrive at any particular point. There isn't a holistic delivery of an outcome. We've just got disparate projects that have been completed one way or the other. So to answer the question, yes, we can have, we do need a non-partisan strategic agenda. So then the question then becomes, how do the parties differentiate themselves? The parties will have to differentiate themselves on the basis of how they intend to deliver value for us. How are they going to be? So they need to sell to us, the voting population, that they are best placed to execute the set agenda to time constraints, to quality constraints, and to cost constraints. That is where the manifesto differentiation should come in. We can do it better. Fine. And then we evaluate them on the promises that they have made to execute the set agenda. But any successive government that comes in and takes on and continues based on the set agenda. You deliver, we vote you back in. You don't deliver, you go and somebody else takes over. So yes, would we benefit from the Kenyan approach? As I certainly believe we would benefit from an objective third party being the one that drives and helps the development of this strategic agenda. Whether it's consultants such as McKinsey, whether it's external parties, whether it's internal consultants within that, we just need to evaluate the pros and cons that the Kenyans have learned from their approach, their experience using McKinsey, and choose, and on that basis, make an informed decision. But yes, we do need an objective third party to drive the agenda. But I would not be here to say whether it's a Kenyan consultancy approach or any other alternative approach that gives us that objectivity. We will need to evaluate it and make a decision.
Well, that brings back the same question in terms of mindset change by these leaders as well, because of course they've got their own mindsets, which is what is leading to their thought process. And I wonder how can we also get them to have that sort of entrepreneurial mindset rather than, this closed mindset in terms of enriching their pockets rather than enriching the countries.
They're no different to the other groups of people we discussed. Basically, they are the coach approach is exactly what I talked about. Yeah. So they are part of the people that need their mindset shifted in order to be able to cascade their mindset shift. So yes, that's really the short answer to that. They are not the leaders that we have in position are exact products of the mindset that we hold as a nation. If we want to shift the mindset, and they are going to be helping cascade that, they need to shift their mindset first in order to be able to cascade. So any program will have to be targeting those coaches, those mentors. When I say coaches, I'm talking about those people in positions of authority that have the ability to influence people's minds. We will need to target them.
One of the questions that we have again from the panel, which is again from Robert Wood, is he's agreeing totally on all the points, but don't you think we should start the positive brainwashing from our nursery schools? I agree it's a long-term task, so therefore we must start from somewhere now. This generation have missed the boat, so to speak, and they just need to be worked on constantly with a collective leadership approach with the media, just as was done with the Galamsey Menace. What do you think?
100%. And that is what I mean when I talk about the educational system. I'm talking about from our nursery. Because actually, Robert is absolutely right. Those are the ones that we can really shape. Children do not come into this world with any mindset whatsoever. We program them. We need to start programming them right from the word go with the kinds of mindset that at the national level we want to produce. So yes, I totally agree. I can speak to Robert offline. I've got some programs that are tailored towards nurseries that are in the pipeline coming, so I can speak to him offline about that. But yes, that is exactly what we need to do. We need to, kids operate on an imagination basis. They imagine. Imagination is key to creativity. Everything that you create starts in the mind. When you program a child to such that they know that they are limitless, their creative potential is limitless. So I am agreeing. Secondly, this generation have missed the boat, so to speak, but we can't leave them, because if we're trying to groom and develop our nursery kids through the educational system, etc., they need positive reinforcement in their societies around them. So if you don't change the messages of the parents, and yet you try and change the messages in the school system, all that's going to happen is they go to school, they're being taught in different ways, they're learning their potential, etc. But this is not being reinforced at home. And so we could actually be making things difficult. Hence, as much as it is more difficult to address these generations, particularly the older generation that seemingly have missed the boat, we will need to bring them along on the journey. But yes, I'm agreeing with Mr. Wood.
Wonderful. Another thought that came in mind was to do is, but then again, we'll go back to teaching the teachers on these things.
Yep.
Because they are the ones that are going to teach the children in the nurseries.
Exactly.
Yeah. Will there be like a program? Is it possible? I don't know. How in your thoughts, what do you think is the best way to head for this direction?
I have a specified program that I'm actually discussing with one of the leading people within the education system. And essentially, it's actually taking 1,000 teachers and essentially programming them to program. Because let me give you an example. Our system is such that we almost raise our children to become very timid. When a child asks questions, they are actually scolded. So the child goes to school and the teacher is scolding the child for if the child if the teacher says something and the child says why, taboo. But the teacher is not coming from a perspective that is, that's all the teacher knows. Because that teacher was actually taught in an environment where, for instance, they may actually by rote be able to teach you. So they can tell you 2 + 2 is 4, but they can't tell you why they know 2 + 2 is 4, because that's not how they've been taught. And therefore, when asking the question, that child is actually putting the teacher in an awkward position. We need to program and different teaching styles into our teachers so that whatever style they use is actually empowering our children to think creatively, to think outside of the box. So if a child actually paints something with a different color, instead of saying, oh, the cassava leaves are not red, they are green, actually try and understand where the child is coming from. Why did you think that yellow or green or whatever would be a proper color for this? We will be surprised at what we learn. But this is not a style that comes naturally to our teachers. We need to teach them to adopt those sort of styles. So yes, there's a program targeting 1,000 teachers to start off with, and it's going to be cascaded, etc., etc. And that is the approach. We will need to do that. Those teachers become buddy coaches to their own colleagues. Then they coach their own colleagues. The colleagues cascade down to the pupils. The pupils are buddying with each other. It is a slow process, but it's a methodical process. And if we follow it, yes, we will see the rewards, probably not in our lifetime, but we will see the rewards.
The question that I have next, I think is partly what you've just answered, but I'll ask it anyway, just so that it leads us into the 9th question. So this is the 8th question, which is, what key things would you say we should have in a strategic plan? What cultural changes do we need if we are to take off?
Okay. Key things for the strategic plan, the long-term agenda, it should cover all sectors of the country. It should address health, social care, agriculture, energy, basically all the functions that we currently have under one government structure or the other. It should address the interdependencies across the country, across the sectors. So we can't be treating these things in silos. We need to have a holistic picture. When all is said and done, when this strategic agenda is executed, where will Ghana be? What will the picture look like? Then we need to identify those interdependencies, and we need to identify the synergies between the different sectors as well. The agenda definitely doesn't have to try merely to solve our immediate problems. It should be leapfrogging us into the 22nd century. And I know that sounds very ambitious, but that's what it should be. So whatever solutions we are proposing should be filtered through the lens of future-proofing those solutions. And we can actually be quite creative here, because we can bypass having to go through the lessons the West have learned by actually leveraging off their lessons and projecting ourselves into the future. There's no point solving the energy crisis without focusing on renewable energy sources. That's what we should be focusing on. We shouldn't be focusing on building additional dams, etc. We need to be focusing on renewable energy. What is the projection into the 22nd century? What kind of energy should we be exploiting? And that's what we should be looking at. So future-proof our solutions. It should be long-term, minimum 30 years, ideally 50 years. That's the long-term picture. It's underpinned by goals, and it has to be carved into different portfolios of initiatives that cut across the government agencies. So there's a portfolio, a program of initiatives cutting across, and each government agency has an element to play within that holistic agenda. And there has to be a route map. So incrementally, when we do our short term, the short term will probably be a parliamentary cycle. These are the projects that within this short 4-year period, we are able to execute. And a 4-year chance, 4-year chance, 4-year chance. Obviously, whatever the position at the end of the 4-year, we refine in order to determine and baseline the set agenda for the next 4 years, regardless of whichever government is in power. So that would be, to me, the elements of a strategic agenda. In terms of culture, yes, absolutely. There needs to be a fundamental cultural change. I think that we've talked about a number of things, but one that immediately needs to, I think, spring to mind is that shift is critical from an employee mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset. It's critical.
The
sorry.
Ninth question that comes to mind, which has been asked, is quite key in terms of our agenda. And the question is, number 9, Ghana currently has a 30-year development plan. Are we to dump this plan if we seek the bipartisan approach, since it was written under instructions from the NDC?
No, absolutely not. This is precisely the issues we have. This one comes in, develops an agenda. The next one comes in, dumps it. The resources that have been put into that process of developing that agenda are then wasted. We need to use that as a starting point. And then there needs to be a bottom line approach. So get some views from our people through the district councils, through our traditional councils, etc. That bottom up approach. And also a top down approach, painting a vision, a picture of where we want to see Ghana arrive at in 10 years, 20, 30 years from now, etc. So the short answer to that is no. Just because we need a non-partisan agenda doesn't necessarily mean that because this is a development plan was written under NDC instructions, it cannot be actually utilized. As I stated before, there are only so many ways in which you can define our current problems. And there are only so many ways in which you can address the solution. What could be different is obviously the route map will not be a partisan-based route map. So it wouldn't be a route map that is geared towards favoring one party or the other. The route map basically is going to be, we need to develop X here in order to release Y there. If we identify a cluster of a district that needs to have a factory, this one district, one factory, whatever, what is the transportation network that is required in order to leverage the product, to be able to transport the product to the market? It's based on that. What energy would we need? So it's got nothing to do with, well, my voters are in the West and therefore we draw a route map. Why? How do we identify that particular area as the area in which we want to focus? Maybe they have the cash cow for the nation, and therefore we need to pump into that, because out of that we get the most revenue for our the other parts of our agenda. That is how objective we will need to evaluate the initiatives and the projects and clusters of programs that we then put in the set agenda that parties will need to implement. So no, we do need, we should not be throwing that 30-year development plan away. We should use it as a starting point.
And what time horizons should we realistically plan over?
Long-term strategic agenda, 30 to 50-year horizon. This should have a robust route map. It should have medium-term plans that cover about a 10-year horizon. The medium-term plans then have portfolios of initiatives and projects that need to be delivered within each political term. And so those portfolio of initiatives on a 4-year cycle will incrementally build to the 10-year plan, which will incrementally build to the 30-year to 50-year plan. But as I said earlier, this needs to be underpinned by obviously a robust risk issue, a dependency identification and management program. And so if new information comes in, our assumptions are changing. We now see things changing at a faster pace, slower pace than previously anticipated. The plans need to be revised to reflect the invalid assumptions or the changing assumptions. So that would be, because once you start saying realistically, we almost want to limit ourselves. But the point is, a plan is exactly that. A plan is forecast based on the information we currently have about future events. If that changes, we revise our plan. But we don't stop planning over a long-term horizon because we don't have all the information we need, or we can't predict the future.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, we can of course predict the future. So in terms of putting plans in place, it's a bit difficult to stick to these plans holistically. In terms of planning ahead as well, What do you think would be the best way to do that? Do we put targets and objectives first, and then target towards these objectives and
Absolutely. So we have a vision. We will obviously have our goals. We have the targets that deliver those goals. We have KPIs, indicators, and these indicators are really the ones that the various functions, the various government functions would actually be evaluated upon. Because those indicators give us information of how well we are delivering against those targets and goals and etc., which ultimately get us to the vision. So the typical strategic goal cascade tool is what we need to employ.
Great. Okay, so we move on to question 11. What collective bipartisan accountability mechanisms should we use to monitor our strategic plans?
Okay, I mean, I will not be saying that I have the complete answer, but I would just put some suggestions out there. So again, this is something obviously we need to think about. Essentially, what we are hoping to get is an objective person to drive the development of the agenda. Person in quotes, not an individual, but obviously a body, and the objective body to actually monitor and evaluate the program. So the key question is really, how do we set up this objective body? A national program office type thing. Every organization, most organizations, when they're going through a change program, you have a program office, an internal program office, and they hold the projects to account. But again, so a national program office, how do we set it up? Give them ombudsman type powers, they are non-political. So it's not a position that is appointed by the ruling government. It's an objective, a separate functioning body, no political appointments. They should have wide-ranging powers. I mean, examples like even Ofsted, the way the Ofsted approach works here comes to mind here in the UK, where Ofsted can go into schools and basically with very little notice, go into schools to evaluate whether policies are being adhered to, etc. Same power. This body should be able to go into government organizations to gather evidence of delivery against plans. They hold the central responsibility of auditing and reviewing the delivery of projects by the central, the ministerial, the ministries, the quasi-government organizations, etc. So I am thinking ombudsman, wide-ranging powers. There are so many models across the West that we can look at, and we can tailor to our specific circumstances. But if we don't have this objective body as part of the strategic agenda, then we will not achieve the bipartisan approach.
Amazing. Yeah, that's true. We just have to be more cautious and work together. And there's the next question, number 12, which is, do you think we need a Singaporean coupled with a Rwandan approach to tackle the mindset of our people in Ghana? Well, Africa in general?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily whether it's Singaporean or the Rwandan approach. There definitely are lessons to be learned from those approaches. I think I've lost you, Theo. Anyway, there definitely are lessons to be learned from those approaches. So we just need to look at other nations that have successfully done what we want to do, that have successfully changed the mindset of their citizens, and adopt the elements that could work for us and change the elements that will not work for us. There's no point just lifting a model and trying to implement it as is. So we need to tailor it. I mean, the models mentioned above, yes, they're a good starting point. We could look at China. You were talking about China, for instance, as well. They shifted from an employee mindset to the entrepreneurial one. I mean, in 1981, 84% of the Chinese population lived in poverty. From the national or global statistics perspective, they were living on less than $1.25 per day. By 2009, this had dropped to 11.8%, largely because of the entrepreneurial changes that happened. I mean, we have our own issues with regards to some of the quality of things that are coming out from them, but on a holistic scale, a concerted effort was made to drive entrepreneurialism, and the rewards were evident. So we can learn from that model as well. What did they do differently? So yes, the short answer to that is we do need to learn from existing models. These two, any others out there, are a good starting point.
Yeah, that's important to relate to the China example as a country and how they quickly resolve their issues and are now one of the leading and most richest countries in the world. I do strongly believe that a lot of what can bring change to our countries and our continent is from learning from these countries and find out exactly or quite similarly how they brought change into their economies for the economies to be thriving that much. Again, I come back to my thoughts where a country is supposed to be run as a business. The only way you can achieve that, or the reason why you need to achieve that, is because without an income, of course, you cannot grow. Hence, if the population or the populace are non-educated and they have the wrong mindsets in terms of growth, of course, we cannot prosper. They are the same people that we expect that they have an entrepreneurial mind. Hence, how do we achieve that? By going into the countries, country lanes, into the little cities, into the villages, and teaching them, empowering them for them to thrive. I believe Africa has now the largest youth population in the world.
Yep.
Hence, we have an upper arm in doing this. What do you think, Akos? What advantages can we add to this proposed ideology that I'm thinking?
Well, in terms of actually targeting the youth and targeting the general population?
Yes, because currently I've been doing a lot of research. I've been reading a lot about how we can develop as a country, as a continent. The main reason why we are as we are Business Links Africa is my belief is that without incorporating all the other African countries that we can trade with, that we can learn from, that we can also not only learn the positives, but learn from the negatives, because I believe that even if a man falls several times, that's nothing wrong with that, because the more you fall, the more you learn. And as you learn, you become better at what you do. So learning from these, our brothers in the different countries, we can learn from their mistakes, we can learn from the positives, and we can make ourselves even much better as the beacon of Africa. So how can we do this to help us to develop and become even better at what we are currently doing?
Okay. I will address, you highlighted something that's quite key there, because the problem sometimes we have is that we seem to constrain discussions on entrepreneurialism to those who are formally within the formal educational sector, and the masses actually sit outside of that. When you come to the West, they will define an entrepreneur as somebody that has created something innovative, etc., etc., because they are coming from a different baseline. What you highlighted is that a nation needs to be run as a business, and I totally agree. But actually, it's a bottom-up approach. A home needs to be run as a business. The home needs to have a vision. The home needs to have a budget. The home needs to have multiple income streams. Otherwise, the home will struggle. So, on that basis, how are we going to get people on the ground floor to run their homes, or to actually run their homes as businesses? And this is where we need to target their local populace. I mean, you've got people with traditional. When I had my first child, he had infantile eczema. The West prescribed all manner of things for him: hydrocortisone, all kinds of stuff, E45. None of these things worked. But there was this traditional herbal concoction, it's all I can call it, that my mom was able to secure, which actually got rid of the problem. This person that has developed this recipe is sitting on a gold mine. But their mindset at the moment is such that he or she is actually probably living in poverty, because they are targeting probably the immediate village next door. How many people next door are going to be having eczema and boils and whatever for you to actually make as much money as you can from it? So yes, educating those people, opening their eyes to the markets beyond their local confines, opening their eyes to the fact that presentation is important. Because as I said, this thing was a concussion. When it came, had I not been desperate, I would have said, there's no way I'm touching this, let alone putting it on this boy's face. But because of the way it had been packaged, but they don't know any better. So those sorts of things. Okay, I mean, we've got people that are somebody. I'll give you an example. Somebody is selling kinky every year in, year out, every day in, day out. They've got only X number of balls of kinky that I will cook and go and sell. If you maintain that level of production, you will maintain, if not reduce, even your level of subsistence. But they don't know any different. So you're preparing kinky, but they can actually prepare more than kinky. What other products have synergy with what they're doing? So they're using corn. Why can't you prepare some porridge? Why can't you prepare some cornmeal cakes? Why can't you do a little bit of banku? These sorts of practical things, messages, need to go to these people. And I would say that, yes, their district councils, their traditional leaders, all those angles are mechanisms for getting these messages across. So I agree with you. We need to target them. And it needs to be a bottom-up approach, and it needs to be a top-down approach. Government needs to see the country as a business. Individuals need to see their homes as businesses and run them in that way.
Great, good stuff. Very important. This topic again goes down to crosses all borders in terms of our business, our families, and our homes. I hope we have the business leaders listening to this. We have our ministers listening to this, and we have our families, friends also making notes in terms of in their minds so that they can extend it to the our next generation of people. As much as we'd like to jump in as experts and develop the country, we cannot do everything on our own. What we can do is to also extend our expert advice, suggestions through discussions to you guys out there so that you can use that to equip yourselves in your areas of work and also in your areas where you are accountable for making the decisions to make things work. Right. We go to the last question from our members, which is question number 13. And it goes, our governments are often sidestepped by aid agencies that refuse oversight as they pursue their own developmental and humanitarian agendas in African countries. I'm referring this particular question to what happened recently in Haiti by Oxfam, for example. Can this action be described as our mindset that needs change? And if so, how can this be implemented?
Okay, this scenario basically buttresses everything we've been discussing previously. It's a demonstration of the fact that we negotiate from a position of weakness because we see ourselves as small and aid dependent. Our governments are sidestepped, yes, because they are negotiating and for fear of losing the aid, these agencies claim they are providing. We are not as robust in our challenge and our governance oversight of these agencies. Basically, we don't want to risk losing the aid. Why? Because we are thinking in silos. If we were thinking in terms, if we don't compartmentalize our thought processes, and we look at the aid that we supposedly receive, and we look at the revenue that these institutions from these the countries that these organizations, these agencies are coming from, the tax revenue that is being repatriated, our negotiation perspective will be different. Indeed, we will then have to ask ourselves, do we actually need the aid? And I guess this is why we currently have an agenda that says beyond aid, Ghana beyond aid. And I'm hoping that it truly becomes a reality as opposed to a maxim or a mantra that we just espouse. I mean, recent examples, yes. So the agency side setup precisely is a symptom of our mindset and our negotiating tactics. And therefore they can, because we're bringing you aid, we can come right roughshod over you with our own hidden agenda, and our personnel are not having the scrutiny and oversight that we need to have, and our children and women, etc., are vulnerable to these people being exploiting them. Again, our children, our people are being exploited, again, precisely because of their mindset. Because again, they think this is our savior, I need the aid, so I might as well go along with their demands, etc. Even I have scenarios, I've heard of scenarios where parents are fully aware of children being exploited, but decide to keep quiet because they don't want to rock the boat. And that's the slavery mindset we are talking about. It permeates everything. Recently, I don't know, we heard about America's bully boy tactics, threatening to withdraw aid from Rwanda, Tanzania, Zambia, because they wanted to go and dump, because they want to go and dump their secondhand clothing there, and this is being resisted.
Oh, yes.
The resistance is still going on. I am hoping that these countries will actually sit it out. Because I can assure you, the aid will still continue. Because they have more to lose than gain by closing their doors to pretending to give us aid. So I'm just watching this unfold, and I just want to see how that's happening. But yes, it's a national and intercontinental issue, and we need to change our culture. A robust culture change program is needed if these scenarios are to change, because we're producing leaders from within that national mindset. We can't expect them to run the country differently if their belief system is so ingrained based on what they have been raised in. If we don't change their mindset, more of this will be perpetuated. We will negotiate from a position of weakness instead of a position of strength.
I'm interested to probably something that I don't, where you pointed out that they need us more than we do, so they need to supply us with the aid, or they'll continue giving us aid. Why would they continue doing that?
Aid is just the West's strategy of actually creating an image in our minds of dependence. Once you receive aid, we receive aid, they are then able, most of this aid that comes with these free trade criteria. Exactly. So they come with a free trade criteria that says, yes, you allow us to come and dump our second-hand clothing, our phones that we don't want, etc., etc. So they need us. They need that outlet for the rubbish they want to get rid of and still get premium from. So right. If you don't give me aid, you can't come and impose your criteria on me. Okay. And if you measure what they get from those agreements versus what is actually given to us as aid, I mean, somebody's done robust, detailed research, so I don't want to actually espouse any figures. It's out there. It can be shared later, whatever. But if you compare the two, it's incomparable. It is incomparable. Whatever we get as aid is a huge, it's a tiny microcosm of what they actually get through obviously the things we agree to, as well as through the private enterprises that they have. Because they need Vodafone's tax revenue. And if they put constraints on us, we're able to constrain foreign investment in some ways that will actually affect their tax revenue.
Right.
All of these factors, all of these dependencies are there. And this is what I'm saying. They're negotiating from a holistic perspective. They tell themselves, let's give them X billion. We know we're going to get Y billion. We are just negotiating on, they've given us X billion. We're not looking at the Y billion that we're actually giving in other ways. And that's our problem, because we're negotiating from a position of weakness.
So in terms of ECOWAS and all these other institutions that has been established, African Aid and all these institutions, I believe they are all aware of these issues, and yet they turn a blind eye.
Yep. Because the mindset change has not happened. And so they will continue to turn a blind eye because the mindset says we need this aid. The mindset says, I will actually just take a backhander and carry on turning a blind eye. That's the slavery mindset, which we've been describing all along. So we cannot, if the mindset does not shift, and we also do not put policies in place that make it difficult for corruption to be executed, then these organizations will continue to turn a blind eye, as you put it, will continue to be ineffective. So we've got all these wonderful umbrella organizations, but they're not necessarily effective as a mechanism for maximizing Africa's potential. How many of the leaders within the OAU spoke against His Royal Highness Trump when he came up with those inappropriate comments?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I was hoping that there will be some sanctions, or there will be at least an outcry from these leaders, not outcry in terms of pleading, but a bold statement that can be implemented across not only the African continent, but across all the countries in terms of these statements that came out from Trump. And unfortunately, we never received anything. It's been brushed under the carpet, and it's like nothing ever happened. Yeah. It's really appalling in terms of the way the subject just went, was just, brushed away within weeks.
Meanwhile, look at the scenario where he tweeted something from an organization that supposedly was a British nationalist organization, inappropriate. He retweeted something from them. Did we see the outcry? Did we see the public reaction? Did we see the steps that were being taken to stop him from actually even coming to visit this country as a result of that?
Yes, that's right.
Is that? And he wasn't even calling any place assholes. He wasn't even being derogatory. He was retweeting an agenda that is held by people within our country, or within the UK. And that was the reaction.
Yeah,
but what did we do? So it was very disappointing to see the reaction or non-reaction of our leadership. Yeah. And this was the time where there should have been a collective response. Instead, the focus has been on, but we do have assholes. Absolutely, we do have problems of how we have managed our infrastructure, etc. Nobody is burying their heads in the sand. But just because my kid is flunking at school doesn't give the head teacher the permission to call him stupid.
Yeah, that's right. And again, we are not referring to the fact that these are our head teachers, but we're referring to the fact in that our leaders should, of course, come out of that mindset of, how should we say it, being beggars and on their feet, and start being the people that we expect them to be as leaders. Thank you so much for your time in this session. Really enlightened us a lot in terms of our thoughts, has reinforced our thoughts in the various directions. I'm sure a lot of our listeners and members will be watching this video to get more feedback later on, even if not live or if they are not with us now. We would take on questions afterwards. Thank Ms. Akosua Ashiabami, who is also a member of Business Links Africa and would be with us. So if you do have any further questions, you can either send the questions either straight onto the forum, or you can sidebar her and she would send you more answers. And that way we can collaborate, network, and further hold discussions in regards to this subject. It's a very important subject to all of us. Whether we like it or not, we need to leave a legacy for our children and our children's children. We need to focus on how best we can make our country thrive to grow in terms of now and long term. These are the areas that we find challenging at the moment. As Africans, we need to be proud. Yes, we are lacking in so many different areas, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's the end of the world. We are still going to keep striving, moving, knowledge and learning from each other so that we can empower ourselves, wake up and move on and be who we are supposed to be as God-given children. Thank you so much, Akos, for this session.
Thank you.
Have you got any last words for us before you leave?
Yeah, we need to be the change we want to see.
Yes. Yes, that's a powerful message out there. We all need to, help bring this change come realistic in our lives, our everyday lives. Any more words before we leave the session?
No, that's it.
Thank you so much once again. And we're proud to have you with us until we have the second session or the next session. I'd like to say a big thank you. And thank you for our audience as well. All the questions that came through. We love you for your support and we look forward to the next session. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Thanks.